the thing that really I enjoy is this sense of my books being sort of going out into the world and being listened to by the Grand Canyon, or being read by somebody in Indonesia or Australia. That is quite a magical feeling, to have sent something out across the world.
Hello, I'm Seth Adam Smith, and this is A Literal Journey, a show where I interview fantastic authors of great stories. So I just finished my second interview with Jonathan Stroud, and let me tell you, it was amazing. It was definitely my favorite of the two interviews that I have done with Jonathan Stroud. And I think the reason for that is because we weren't just talking about a series or a book or an idea. We're actually talking about some really large concepts, his writing and what encourages him, and particularly his family life and how that's an inspiration for him. In fact, what he said about his family was so inspirational to me as a father of two children that I actually told a couple of people some of the things that he said. I was just so inspired by it, and so I think you will be inspired by it as well. If you're somebody who is struggling to write or struggling to get your writing published, you'll definitely be inspired by what he says about that. So Jonathan, one of the things I really love about your writing is that your characters just seem to have a very strong presence, a strong voice. Are you in any way enacting or vocalizing these parts of these different characters? How are you bringing them to life?
That's a really good question. I don't tend to read it out loud, but I do vocalize internally, if that makes sense. A lot of the early scenes that I try to write are essentially dialogue with key characters interacting in some way, and through these little scenes, which obviously I replay in my head. I read it and I try and listen to the sound of the of these characters, try to pick up what kind of a person they are, what sort of sense of humor they have or lack of it, what their weaknesses, their strengths. A lot of this just comes from these little interactions, and once I can kind of get a hold of the key characters, then everything else kind of comes from it. And so yeah, the voice of these figures is one of the very first things that I will try to do. But as I say, I don't tend to kind of actually read it out loud. I should do, because I've been told by a lot of people that reading out your stuff generally, not just dialogue, but just reading out your prose is a really good idea, because then you see whether it truly does flow. You read it in your head and you think, oh, that's great work of literature there, but actually when you read it, you discover that it's all, it's too heavy, there's too many words, it doesn't flow. So I think what you're doing is absolutely bang on.
That's fascinating, because one of the things that really drew me into your books was, I guess, the reality of the characters. Each of them seems to have a very strong voice or a strong character. I mean, the characters just really have drawn me into the Lockwood Co series.
Well, it's really lovely to hear that. I'm sure I've sort of said it before, but I think getting your characters right is the key task. If you've got somebody that is interesting, entertaining, likable, fascinating, any combination of that, then your readers will follow them through any old plot. Obviously you want to have a good plot. You don't want to stuff it full of cliches, but the character's the essential thing. And if you get them right, then you're onto a winner.
So tell me a little bit more about your family life. How many kids do you have?
I have three children.
Three kids. Wow. I have kids. I have two kids, and I can't get anything done when I'm home ever. So I have to ask, how is it possible that you are a best-selling author? I mean, how do you write? How do you get things done? How do you get novels created in the wonderful chaos that is a family?
Well, yeah, I kind of wonder that myself, really. Sometimes it doesn't work, as I'm sure there's just too many things. You're being pulled in too many different directions. I
Right.
mean, I think if you're a writer, you have to be adept at some point. You've got to be adept at kind of just closing everything else off and sitting in a very boring room, which in my case is my little study upstairs, just sort of falling into this world that you're creating. And it's tricky at home. I've got to say, I used to have a little office that I went to. I'd cycle to it, and it was only about a 10-minute cycle, but that was really important, and it used to be a very big buffer between my domestic life and my work life, and the two were very separate. And I've got to say, in some respects, I do regret not having that. In fact, sometimes I deliberately will up sticks and go to. In fact, actually, recently I've been going to London, which is about half an hour from where I live. I get on the train, go to London, and I go to the British Museum, which is obviously a fantastic museum, but there's a kind of a room that you can go to if you're a member there. And I go in, I sort of sit there, and I'll do my work in this quiet little spot, a cup of coffee and stuff. Then I can go out and get stimulated by this fantastic museum. Even just the fact of going to London actually stimulates me, because a lot of my books have a London element, and it's just important as a writer to get stimulated, whether it's the Grand Canyon or a London back alley. It's important to get out of your office. So to answer your question, family life is a kind of key. It's a key sort of balance that offsets the floaty, fantastic, airy fairy aspect of my day job. It's always a pleasure to sort of come back and be reminded about real things and real problems and school runs and who had what for dinner and all that kind of stuff. Sometimes the two don't mix quite right, but I'm very blessed to have both elements in my life.
In the work that I do with nonprofits, we've learned, repeatedly over and over again that strong families are crucial, not only to recovery, right, but just success in life. And with that, I guess with that context, how has having a family positively impacted your writing and your success as an author?
Well, no, you're quite right. A friend of mine, who's a playwright called Simon Stevens. He years ago, we were at some thing together, and he sort of turned to me and he sort of said, "Of course, it's all about your family. Everything else is just a sideshow." And that stuck with me. He's absolutely right, because you can have all the success that you dream of as a writer, as anything. But ultimately, the thing that actually makes you get up in the morning and feel like your life is worthwhile is the family and your children. So I found. In fact, funnily enough, my period of success as a writer has been almost identical with my period of having a family. My wife, Gina, well, before we got married, my wife actually took me to one side and said, "If you want to be a writer, I'll support you. You can give up your job and that she would earn us some money, and I would spend a year trying to be a writer and make it work. So I wouldn't have even become a writer if it wasn't for her actually giving me that declaration of faith.
Wow.
She would let me go and do it, give it a try. If it didn't work out, that's fine. We would do something different. But she gave me the strength of purpose to go off and become a writer. And then we got married, and I became a success with my Bartimaeus books. And my daughter was born in the same year. So I've always had this kind of twin these twin things that make my life sort of ground my life, the enjoyment of working, and the enjoyment of being with people that I love. Obviously, being a writer is completely solitary. In order to sort of have the energy and the commitment for that solitary pursuit, I think you need to go away and recharge the batteries, and that means being emotionally recharged with your loved ones. So I for me anyway, it's the two go absolutely hand in hand.
That was a marvelous answer. I mean, there was like 6 or 7 pull quotes from there. I was like, I could just that alone, fantastic. That was so wonderful. Thank you. All right, so I have to ask. Writers are commonly perceived as introverts, and that's certainly true with me. If I'm writing, I'm very introverted, and then just in general, I'm an introverted person. But from things I've seen of you on tour and on stage, you seem like an extroverted person, and I just wanted to get your take on that. Do you see yourself as more of an introvert or an extrovert?
That's a good question. I think I'm quite evenly balanced, actually. I don't know which dominates. It's a very odd one. I suppose the bulk of the time I am happy being on my own, in my own company, just working away, just chipping away at this big project. I don't need anyone else there to help me. I'm happy to just do it, and I've got confidence in myself that's a good thing. But actually, that's not enough. And on my own, sooner or later, as I'm sure you and everyone, all creative types know, you get to points where you need help. You need to find someone to show your work to discuss it, to open up, to kind of air the room a little bit. And my wife would be my first port of call. But obviously I then have people like Georgia, my publicist, or my editors in America and the UK. You need to be able to have fruitful human contact and enjoy that, because these guys are going to give you the necessary support and advice and insight to take your work to the next level. And then beyond that, I actually actively enjoy getting my work out into the world. I suppose that's the key, because when you're starting out as a writer, you're generally sort of quite cautious and nervous about what you're doing. Is it any good? I'm not sure I want to show anybody. I can remember still when I was a young editor, writing some little bit of writing for some book. It was a very small thing, just a few lines, and I gave it to my boss, and she really took it apart. It wasn't good enough, and I remember getting absolutely I was furious and really upset. And that was just sort of a couple of lines I'd done that day, absolutely no significance. But I was so upset that my work, something that I had done, was being pulled apart. But it was a necessary thing to go through, because sort of after that, fine, you do it again. Oh, that's all right this time. You learn that actually it's fine to have things looked at and picked apart. You go away, you make it better, and it'll pass. It'll pass the test, down the line. So it was very, I think it's very important as a writer to be able to go out into the world, enjoy interacting with other people, and I personally love the whole extrovert business of going on tour, doing events, talking to kids in schools, doing media stuff, traveling around, seeing new places. That recharges me. I notice it always that I get very tired by the end of a project, and it's a delight to go out and promote the book for several months. I'll go off and I'll have my extrovert hat on. That's what I'm doing. I really enjoy it. And then conversely, by the time I've done that for a little while, I start to get a bit tired of it, and I'm really happy then to go back and shut the door, work on a new project. So it's a long-winded answer, but it comes down to the fact that both extrovert and introvert are sort of important aspects of my personality, I guess.
So tell me, what is your favorite thing about being a published author?
The moment that I remember as being most special, curiously enough, actually, with my first novel, which was called Buried Fire, that I wrote getting on for 20 years ago, and I got sent a proof, a kind of galley copy by my publisher before it came out. So I don't know, 6 months before, and it was the first time ever I'd seen any of my stuff actually in a genuine book format, and that was quite a moment. That really was quite special to think that I had created something which existed in book form. Yeah. Thereafter, the thing that really I enjoy is this sense of my books being sort of going out into the world and being listened to by the Grand Canyon, or being read by somebody in Indonesia or Australia or Japan, or there's this that blows my mind really, that there are people in far off countries that I will never visit who have read the stories that I've created in my little drab home counties England study. That is quite a magical feeling, to have sent something out across the world. So that's really the thing that keeps me warm at night when I'm struggling with the latest project.
All right, so sort of the opposite of the previous question, what has been your biggest struggle as an author? What do you find challenging about being an author?
Wow, that's a good question, and
you better have a good answer.
I don't know if I do actually. In a way, this is a testimony to how sort of lucky I am. There really is no downside to being a full-time writer. I'm very lucky that my stories have had any audience, and I've been lucky enough to have an audience that's quite a large audience at times. There's no sort of equivalent negative. Obviously, you get times where the inspiration isn't flowing, and you have a day where it's a bad day. You feel really grumpy. I'm an idiot. I can't think of any more ideas. My best idea was 20 years ago. All that sort of stuff. You get those moments, but you just keep plodding along like everyone does. You put your backside on the seat and you just scribble away. And you get through it, and you put together a new idea, and that's something that gives me great pleasure. So, I honestly don't have a big negative. It's all good. If you're doing a job, whatever it is, which allows you to express yourself, to be an individual, to make something, to be creative, then what's not to like about that?
So then I guess I would have to ask, has there ever been a time when something didn't go the way you wanted or hoped as an author, and when you encountered disappointment, how did you overcome that particular struggle?
You're never going to achieve the same level of success all the time. Regardless of who you are or what you do, you're going to get peaks and troughs. And I've had those periods where I'm working on a project which has really not been working, and I've got very kind of fraught by it. And usually, what happens is that means that there's some key part of the book isn't right. Some decision I made early on that actually was incorrect, and everything else is sort of wrong because of it. So sooner or later, what happens is I have to take a step away. Usually I'll talk to my wife, give it to my wife to read, discuss it with her, get her opinion. And usually out of that, comes the answer where I think, oh, okay, that's it. I can get rid of that character, or I have to change. I can't remember if I told you this before, but one of my Bartimaeus books began life as a series of short stories, and it wasn't working. Nothing quite meshed. And I finally twigged that I had to scrap the whole concept and just take one of the stories and make that into a proper full novel. Once I'd made that decision, once I'd binned all that work that I'd been doing for months, it was a hard moment. But once you have that insight, then it becomes easy again. You go, oh, okay, fine. I now know what I'm doing. So, you obviously have bad moments, but you just keep working, and you soon find a way around them.
That's good. So with that in mind, what advice would you have for struggling authors or writers who are either struggling to get their writing done or struggling to get their writing published? What would you say to encourage them to keep moving forward?
I think the first thing to say is that all writers go through that phase. We've all been there. Either A, starting out not quite knowing what your voice is, what kind of writer you are, and B, having the difficulty of how the heck to get something published. There are endless accounts of how J.K. Rowling sent Harry Potter to, I don't know, 11 different publishers, and they all said no, and then finally, it was taken, and the rest is history. And in my sort of less extreme case, my first novel, I wrote it when I was in my mid 20s. I gave it to a publisher. They absolutely tore it apart, and I put it away for a year. But I didn't throw it away. I came back to it later. I read it. I thought, no, I'm gonna try again. And finally, I found someone who saw through the imperfections and the fact that it needed a lot of work. And she gave me, the opportunity to rework it and ultimately to publish it. So you have to kind of have faith in yourself, in what you're trying to do. Don't lose sight of what you want to write. The kind of book, the kind of story that you've got this itch to tell. So you have faith, but you then also just have to kind of accept that the road to publication is a sort of an uncertain one, and you just have to keep plodding away, talking to people, showing it to people, getting advice, taking the advice or not taking it if you feel like what you've done is actually good. You stick to your guns, and you keep working. Try something different. If that one hasn't worked, you try a different thing. You just plod away, and you get your reward ultimately. So I think it is a struggle, and you have to just keep. I think you have to keep the enjoyment alive. That's the other thing I'd say.
Yeah.
You play around with what you're doing. You try different things. You experiment with what kind of a voice you actually have as a writer, and have as much fun as possible. Because if you're enjoying it, if you're enjoying this game of creating something out of ink and paper, if you get a real fire inside you when you do it, then the chances are you will be able to pass that excitement on to someone else. So you just have to keep the fire burning.
That was a perfect answer. The keep the fire burning. I love that. I love that idea. I've often in my work and what we do and what I read, there's something about fire and light and the fire
Yes.
inside of each person. I love that. Thank you. That was a perfect answer.
Oh, I'm really pleased. Yeah, thank you. Well, your questions are great because they sort of allow me to burble, and I'm very much enjoying it.
I've never really heard the word burble used in this context. I think I've heard it about 3 or 4 times in our interview, and now I think it's going to stick. It's going to become part of my vocabulary now.
It's a good word.
Yeah, it's a good word.
It's a good word, but burbling is good because it's sort of, it's not obviously there are times when burbling is not good, but actually sometimes that's what it's about. The conversation, you let it flow, you let it out, and actually as a writer, that's what you do. You often, especially early on in a project, you just let the stuff come out, and you give it a chance to get on the page, and you see. Obviously, a lot of it's not going to be any good, but within that there'll be something that you can use. So it's very much part of a creative act. A bit of burbling once in a while.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you like this show, there's plenty more to come, so go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Really, just subscribe. Just press the button. Please, do it.